Hey, what are you reading, man?
Chemistry. Atoms, to be specific. But honestly, how do we get to know that these scientists are not making stuff up? I mean, they cannot even see atoms.
The idea that matter is made up of small fundamental particles called atoms all began around the year 400 BCE. This Greek philosopher called Democritus imagined cutting matter into smaller and smaller bits until he reached something that became uncuttable, something sort of indestructible. He called that indestructible particle atomos. Now, atomos is just a Greek word that means indivisible. Now, fast forward a couple of decades later, this chemist called John Dalton comes along and he proposes his own idea based on his experiments that atoms are just tiny solid spheres and that each and every element we all know of has its own kind of atom. He says that gold is made of gold atoms, copper is made of copper atoms, silver is made of silver atoms, and so on and so forth. He goes ahead to say that atoms cannot be created and neither can they be destroyed. Now, after some time, another scientist again came up. He was called J.J. Thomson. Now, after his famous cathode ray experiment, J.J. Thomson discovers that atoms are made up of tiny negatively charged particles called electrons. To balance all the charges and keep the atom stable, J.J. Thomson imagined an atom as a positively charged solid sphere and the electrons were embedded inside of it. Just like these chocolate particles are embedded in this cookie. The cookie represents the soft positively charged sphere, and then the chocolate particles represents the electrons embedded inside. He called it the plum pudding model of an atom. But then there was this other scientist called Ernest Rutherford. Now, Rutherford was quite unconvinced with Thomson's plum pudding model of an atom. He decided to devise an experiment to, prove whether Thomson's idea of the atom was right or wrong. Ernest Rutherford fired positively charged particles, aka alpha particles, at a thin sheet of gold. If J.J. Thomson were right, nearly all the alpha particles are going to pass through the thin sheet of gold foil undeflected. But then, to his surprise, after his experiment, yeah, most of the alpha particles went through the thin sheet of gold, but then some were deflected at very sharp angles. And this could only mean one thing, that atoms had dense positively charged nucleus and electrons were just orbiting around it, much more like planets orbiting around our sun. He called it the nuclear model of an atom. But now, the problem was, the electron is supposed to eventually spiral down into the nucleus. Why? Because according to Maxwell's equation, an accelerating charge constantly radiates off its energy as electromagnetic radiation. Now, to solve this problem, another scientist called Niels Bohr had to step in, and then he came up with this idea that electrons orbit the nucleus at fixed energy levels, much more like floors in a storage building. In those fixed energy levels, the electrons were finally stable. They didn't radiate off their energy as they had thought previously. Now, after a few years with the emergence of quantum mechanics, this new physicist called Erwin Schrödinger comes up, and he's like, forget orbits, electrons are not distinct particles, they're just probability clouds buzzing around the nucleus of an atom. And welcome to quantum mechanics. Now trust me, you do not want to enter into that part of physics, you will lose your sanity. So yeah, atoms started as a wild, abstract guess by some Greek philosopher. But now, our understanding of it has evolved over time. Now we know that it makes up everything. It makes up you, it makes up me, it makes up everything we see around us.
I think I can understand it now. It makes sense. Thank you for explaining it to me.